It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for our weekly discussion of the important legal and political issues of the day. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580. You can send me a tweet at Mark Scaringi, and I'll read your tweet on the air. For all my columns, prior podcasts of the show, and a look at some great merchandise we have, you can check out the MarkScaringiShow.com website. And today we're broadcasting on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live once again. We have Sean Guay, the proprietor of that media company in Harrisburg. Welcome, Sean, and welcome to the viewers and friends of Harrisburg 100. It's been a busy couple of days in the political and legal news arena. The United States Supreme Court nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh hit a bump in the road. President Trump's former campaign manager Paul Manafort has entered a guilty plea, and President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has withdrawn the arbitration claim he had filed against Stormy Daniels, seeking to hold her in breach of the non-disclosure agreement she had signed with then-candidate Trump. So there are three big news-breaking stories coming out of our nation's capital. So we'll talk about those issues, those stories, and we'll talk about whatever my listeners would like to discuss today on the Mark Scaringi Show. Again, you're welcome to call in 717-540-0580 and comment on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. Well, yesterday, President Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, pled guilty in federal court to 2 counts. Manafort and the Office of Special Counsel, well, they've worked out a cooperation agreement, and that will include Manafort being interviewed by prosecutors and possibly testifying as a witness, if necessary, in future cases and future prosecutions that the special counsel may bring. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, said in response to the Manafort plea deal, he said, once again, an investigation has concluded with a plea having nothing to do with President Trump or the Trump campaign. Manafort, in a trial set to begin September 24th, had been facing 7 counts of foreign lobbying violations and witness tampering, and the trial was scheduled in federal court in Washington, D.C. Now, earlier in August, in a separate trial in Virginia, a federal jury found Manafort guilty on 8 counts, basically federal tax and banking crimes and some foreign lobbying registration violations. But with regard to the plea that Manafort has entered yesterday, the 2 charges Manafort pled guilty to are these. 1, conspiracy against the United States, and 2, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Special Counsel Mueller's office dropped 5 other counts, including obstruction of justice, providing false statements, conspiracy to launder money, and acting as an unregistered foreign agent. And I'll make a brief comment on the plea deal. I'd like you to notice that Special Counsel Mueller's office, they kept the 2 most ominous-sounding charges, conspiracy against the United States and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Now, conspiracy against the United States sounds very bad, doesn't it? But what it does is it gives Democrats a lot of ammunition to use against Manafort and, through a guilt by association, President Trump. And notice Mueller dropped the obstruction of justice charge in exchange for a plea to conspiracy to obstruct justice. So conspiracy means there was 1 or more co-conspirators in the obstruction of justice count. So again, it sounds bad, gives ammunition to the Democrats, and gives the impression that there are these other co-conspirators out there, and that perhaps the president or other members of his campaign team are the co-conspirators with Manafort on Russian collusion. That's what the Democrats will allege, but of course the plea has nothing to do with Russian collusion. None of the charges had anything to do with Russian collusion. But it's the perception that rules the day, regrettably, in our political and legal arenas in the country today. In reality, the obstruction charges, they're based on allegations of alleged witness tampering, after Manafort was already initially charged with several crimes, but the crimes were related to his work for the Ukrainian government and bank and tax fraud, and the underlying charge of tax fraud and failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. So according to the charges, Manafort tried to influence two individuals to induce them to say falsely that they didn't work in the United States as part of a lobbying campaign, even though Manafort then and there well knew that they did lobby within the United States. So that's one of the conspiracy charges that Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign manager, pled to. And actually, there's a lot of talk in the media today about this cooperation agreement that was a part of the plea. And the cooperation agreement is being much discussed on CNN and MSNBC and other more liberal news media about trying to insinuate that this means Manafort has the goods on Trump and collusion, and in exchange for a more lenient plea agreement, he's going to give the goods over to Special Counsel Mueller and his team of investigators and prosecutors. But that's, in fact, not what has occurred. The cooperation agreement is more likely about helping the Mueller team prosecute President Bill Clinton and President Barack Obama's former attorney, Greg Gregg of the Skadden Arps firm, and similar charges potential charges against Tony Podesta, a longtime Democratic fixer and brother to the former chairman of the Democratic National Committee and chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, John Podesta. And so there are allegations swirling around Washington, D.C. today that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is closing in on these Democratic lawyers who are involved with Manafort in this Ukrainian lobbying operation. So that is more likely what the cooperation agreement is, notwithstanding kind of the caterwauling going on in the liberal media that this has something to do with the collusion between Trump and the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 presidential campaign that Paul Manafort knows something about. But that's not the case. According to the Manafort plea agreement, the sentencing guidelines estimate a potential sentence of between 210 and 262 months in prison. That's about 17 and a half years to about 22 years. His sentence ultimately, though, will be determined by the judge. Now, each count to which Manafort is pleading guilty carries a maximum period of incarceration of 5 years. So it looks like through the plea agreement, Manafort is reducing and limiting the maximum period of incarceration that he will face to perhaps 10 years if the judge sentences consecutively as opposed to concurrent sentences. Another point to make about the Mueller investigation is apparently, and this is something that has not been reported by the national news media, that apparently Mueller has agreed to accept written answers from President Trump instead of being able to interview or depose him in person. Remember, there was a lot of back and forth about whether or not Robert Mueller was going to be able to compel the President of the United States to sit down and be interviewed or deposed by his team of investigators and prosecutors. It looks like that's not going to happen. We'll talk more about the Special Counsel Robert Mueller investigation, the Manafort plea, and other issues when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Okay, Facebook, we're on our first commercial break on the radio.
WHB 580 to report a traffic issue to our total traffic tip line.
So now they should be able to hear on Facebook.
That's WHB 580. This report.
Yeah. All right, so that's working, I guess.
Now you can know the exact price. You don't have to move and see what other people can afford. When you're ready to buy a new or used car, visit TrueCar to enjoy a more confident car buying experience. WHB 580
volume on
CBS
your
21
Harrisburg
first
100
warning
Facebook
weather.
and see if you can hear this.
Our weekend weather slowly improving.
Oh, yeah, we can hear
trying to peek through here this afternoon.
You can hear it?
Highs in
That's,
the low 80s.
as long as it's
We're
being
mostly
played into the
leaving
room,
around
it's going to go into that
Okay, good.
microphone. I know that works, yeah.
Yeah, you should be fine.
All right, let's hear from our Harrisburg 100 Facebook listeners.
We might turn the commercials off
Showers
Oh, okay.
while we're talking on Facebook.
ICBS
Yeah.
21
Oh,
meteorologist
okay,
Tom
on.
Russell.
Turn the mic
82
on.
degrees in
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So we're figuring out some of these technical things here, but
Hopefully, oh yes, we have a commenter who is telling us that he can hear us and he hears us well. Well, that's good to know. So here we are on our commercial break and on WHP 580 iHeartRadio commercial break, but we're always live and always available to our friends and commenters on Harrisburg 100. And you're welcome to type in a comment and we'll respond. Either on Harrisburg 100 Facebook, or maybe we'll read your comment live on the air, and tens of thousands or hundreds, millions. How many listeners do we have? We're not quite sure.
the reach is very, very, very big reach.
It's a big reach. It's a big reach. So a lot going on in Washington, D.C. today. You know, this show is all about politics and the law, and we've got lots to work with over the past couple of days, really since Thursday. We've had Thursday, the big story on Kavanaugh broke hard. Friday, the Manafort plea broke. So there's a lot going on in our nation's capital. The Republicans in the Senate and the Republicans in the president's administration are really, they're being attacked from all angles.
Yeah, and Mark's made some good points about how what the liberal media is covering and the different, the angle that you're getting from them is just, it's quite skewed, I would say, as far as.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I hope what I'm reporting is correct. I believe it is, that there is now an agreement between Mueller's team and the president's lawyers that the president will provide written answers to questions, to interrogatories, as we say in the civil law, but there will be no interview by the prosecutors of Special Counsel Mueller. So that seems like that's a big story that we're not really hearing much about in the media. The media is more focused on trying to somehow claim that this cooperation agreement with Manafort and Mueller has something to do with collusion, which of course it doesn't.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be
okay. My mic is on, right? Yeah.
Now more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism, where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from our perspective of putting America first. We're talking about some real breaking news stories coming out of Washington, D.C. The Paul Manafort guilty plea was entered in federal court yesterday, where President Trump's former campaign manager pled guilty to 2 counts involving obstruction of justice and conspiracy against the United States of America. And it looks like there is also a cooperation agreement involved in that plea. Our friends in the liberal media are trying to explain that the cooperation agreement has been done because Manafort has something to say about President Trump and his campaign and collusion with the Russian government. It turns that's not going to be the case. I will give you my opinion today that that's not what it's about, that it looks like it's about Manafort's involvement with some pretty prominent Democratic lawyers, Greg Gregg and Tony Podesta, a lawyer lobbyist, that with strong ties to the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton, who were involved to some degree with Manafort's efforts in the Ukraine, which underlie the charges, many of the charges and the pleas today. So that story will continue to develop, and we'll continue to apprise our listeners and our Facebook, Harrisburg 100 Facebook viewers, as that story continues to develop. In other news, we had a bombshell in the United States Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Regrettably, it has it's been like a bomb going off in those Senate confirmation hearings. United States Senator Dianne Feinstein released a rather vague statement, I believe that was on Thursday, about someone who has accused Judge Kavanaugh of doing something inappropriate nearly 40 years ago when he was in high school. Imagine that. I wonder if any of my listeners have done anything inappropriate when they were in high school, and if they would like to have whatever that was being the focal point of the attention of the entire national and international news media. And I'll tell you, it is scary, and it's another reason why, it's more proof as to why most Americans probably want to run away from politics, and they want to run away from elective office and not get involved, because something like this happens where there's a vague allegation about something, some shadowy thing that may or may not have happened 40-some years ago, and you've led an exemplary life with nary even a speeding ticket on your record, and you've risen through the ranks, and you've attended the best colleges and law schools, and you've done so well in your life, and you've had such great accomplishments, and you have a beautiful wife and lovely children, and you're at the precipice of becoming a United States Supreme Court justice. And then all of a sudden, something like this, some vague insinuation of some tawdry thing that you may or may not have been involved in, and that may or may not have occurred, that no one will talk about on the record, there are no witnesses for. It really is, I think, a travesty. And it's a shame that the country has to go through this. It's a shame that Judge Kavanaugh has to endure this, and you feel for him, and you feel for his wife and his children. But nevertheless, Dianne Feinstein, United States Senator from California, she issued a statement, a very vague statement about something that happened inappropriate with Judge Kavanaugh when he was about 17 years of age in high school. Senator Feinstein, of course, is seeking to destroy the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh, so she sat on this allegation for a couple of months, and she made a show of explaining that she had referred the matter to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The media, of course, was in heaven over this allegation. Our friends in Hollywood are all in an uproar about this, and they're licking their chops, and they think they've got Kavanaugh where they want him. They think they can take him out with this. Now, of course, the FBI almost immediately declined to investigate the matter because there's nothing involving any federal crime of any kind. Feinstein received this letter sometime in the summer, and of course waited until now just to release it, just in time to try to block the confirmation vote. Now, the woman who wrote the letter, I guess to a congressman or a congresswoman then forwarded the letter to United States Senator Judge, as if she is a judge, Dianne Feinstein, a senator. The letter contains an allegation that something inappropriate happened, but the woman who's claiming something inappropriate happened has requested her anonymity. So her name hasn't been disclosed and will not be disclosed, and she has declined to comment, and she has declined to be interviewed. So it's the most, how does one deal with something like this, and an allegation of something inappropriate 40 years ago by a person who will not put their name to the allegation, and the media has reported it 1 billion times over and over again, but they don't even know what it is. They don't even know what happened. You can't talk to the person who's making the allegation. You don't know what her name is. There are no witnesses. There was no report to the school 40 years ago. No report to law enforcement. You got nothing to work with on this. Apparently, the story broke by this Ronan Farrow, who's doing a pretty nice job of doing investigating reporting. And Jane Mayer, and apparently Kavanaugh is accused of holding down a female and trying to force himself on her at a party when he was in high school at Georgetown Prep down in Bethesda, Maryland. And the woman claims that Kavanaugh covered her mouth and she couldn't cry out, and that he and another male turned up the music in the room so that no one can hear what was going on, but she did manage to escape. So that's it. That's the allegation 40-some years ago. And both men deny the allegation. There are no witnesses, and the woman who's made the allegation is demanding that she remain anonymous and will not speak to anyone about what happened. So there we have it. So the Democrats will now use this to try to hang this man and destroy him and ruin his career. and impugn his integrity and destroy his reputation. But that's the way things work down there in Washington, D.C. Now, some in the media are talking about this is a potential criminal act. That Judge Kavanaugh is potentially involved in a crime. And here is the interesting and unfortunate thing, and this has this also relates to what Pennsylvanians are confronting right now, which is the question, should they increase the statute or lengthen the statute of limitations in criminal and civil cases resulting from the Pennsylvania grand jury investigatory report on the Catholic Church and the decades-long abuse and cover-up of the abuse in that church. And so members of the Pennsylvania General Assembly are now looking closely at the statute of limitations, both civilly and criminally, here in Pennsylvania, to elongate them, to expand them, so as to allow additional civil claims that would otherwise be time-barred, and allow criminal prosecutions that would otherwise be time-barred. But think about this. In Maryland, where Georgetown Prep is located and where this incident allegedly occurred 40 years ago, Maryland has no statute of limitations for most crimes and offenses. Think about that. The allegation appears to make out somewhat of a case for attempted sexual assault, or what the Maryland statutes might call attempted sexual offense in the second degree. That's a felony in Maryland. A separate statute says that even an attempt of this offense is a felony that can be punishable with up to 20 years in prison. Again, no statute of limitations in Maryland for this offense. Also, in Maryland, assault in the second degree includes unwanted physical contact, attempted unwanted physical contact, or even causing a person to have apprehension of unwanted physical contact. Think about that. In Maryland, it's a second-degree criminal offense to cause a person to have apprehension of unwanted physical contact. This is a misdemeanor offense. It's punishable with imprisonment. Again, no statute of limitations. And Maryland also has a common law offense of false imprisonment, which involves keeping a person somewhere against their will. While this particular woman who's made this accusation against then 17-year-old student Brett Kavanaugh, this woman reportedly did escape from the room. The accusation is that Kavanaugh did hold her down. So that fact could substantiate a case, a charge for false imprisonment. So because Maryland, the state of Maryland, does not have a statute of limitations for any of these offenses, Judge Kavanaugh is now subjected to a media circus that he could be prosecuted for these crimes that occurred 40-some years ago when he was 17. He's now, 65 or something like that, and on the verge of becoming confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. Is that fair? And is it fair? And we'll open up this we'll open up our phone bank, and we'll have our listeners call in, because I want to hear from them what they think about what is happening to Judge Brett Kavanaugh. They think it's fair, this allegation by an anonymous source, a woman who refuses to put her name to her allegation, refuses to be interviewed, refuses to comment publicly. Is that fair? Is it fair in Maryland that there is no statute of limitations for these offenses? Is that the way the American justice system should be about? Or do individuals have certain rights to not have to answer or deal with these vague charges that came out 40 years ago? We'll talk more about this after we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. Stay tuned. I think it really is, it's remarkable that what's happening to Judge Kavanaugh is breaking at the same time the Pennsylvania General Assembly is dealing with very similar issues coming out of the Pennsylvania grand jury investigation report. Calls to provide a window to allow individuals who have been harmed, abused, sexually, physically abused by Catholic church officials, priests, who would otherwise be time barred by the
the end of the statute of limitations in civil cases to give them a 2-year window of opportunity to bring the claims now. And also, there's talk about reforming Pennsylvania's criminal statute of limitations on these types of offenses. There's talk about abolishing the statute of limitations in criminal cases. That's what Maryland apparently has had for quite some time. And when you think about these men and women who, as children, were abused and harmed by Catholic priests, and of course this would apply to any individual who harms a child. You're very sympathetic with these victims, and you feel for them, and you want them to have the right to have their day in court, to have their claim adjudicated in civil court, or where they can have their rights vindicated, or have their claim brought through the criminal justice system, where the individual who committed the act will face the penalty of the law. But now look at Judge Kavanaugh, and he's dealing with an extremely vague allegation from 40 some years ago, and there's no statute of limitations in Maryland for this. What does he do? Is this fair to him that he now has to wake up every morning with the threat that there could be a criminal prosecution brought? So I think it really presents a dilemma to those of us in Pennsylvania who are dealing with this very same issue regarding the Catholic Church abuse scandal. It does give you something to think about, doesn't it?
It sure does. Yeah. I mean, as far as just from my point of view, it almost seems like they're constantly crying wolf here with all these accusations. From one point of view, it kind of could hurt their credibility. But then, from the judge's point of view, he has to go through if there would be some sort of investigation, and that's going to smear his reputation. And from the point of view of his family having to go through all that, that's really not fair. I mean, unless, of course, there was some criminal act, but for the most part, it looks like political mudslinging and
the worst kind.
Right. So, as far as the statute of limitations, I mean, it's hard to say if there's been crimes committed in the past, if there's a way to prove it. I don't know if individuals should have that right to have the statute of limitations or not. I'm not sure, as far as it being in Maryland, that they don't have the statute of limitations. Has there been people that have suffered because of that and had to go through investigations that shouldn't have taken place, or somehow?
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. We've had some bombshells exploding in Washington, D.C. with the recent allegations as recently as just a few days ago, released by Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California, who was looking to torpedo the confirmation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court. She released a statement indicating there is a potential allegation of abuse, of sexual abuse involving Judge Kavanaugh and a girl when they were children, when they were 15, 16, 17 years of age, when Judge Kavanaugh was a student at Georgetown Prep in Bethesda, Maryland. It's 40 years later, nary a peep for 40 years, but now it is at the center of the nation's attention. The Democrats and our friends in the liberal media and in Hollywood, they're licking their chops. They think that this might be just enough to destroy the Kavanaugh nomination. We shall see. The Senate, I believe Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has indicated there will be a vote on the 20th, and it's going to occur notwithstanding these recent allegations. So call in and let me know what you think about this allegation of this of something that occurred 40-some years ago when Judge Kavanaugh was a young man, a teenager. Do you think that this is a credible allegation? Do you think that Judge Kavanaugh should step down? should reject the nomination and allow some other individual to be nominated by the president to be on the Supreme Court. Call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580. And it also has implications here in Pennsylvania, where we're still kind of reeling from this very sad and sobering report from the Pennsylvania grand jury that detailed decades-long abuse in the Catholic Church, priests and children, and how the Catholic Church was involved in covering up a lot of that abuse. There's talk about reforming Pennsylvania's civil and criminal statute of limitations to elongate them, to allow more time for claimants, victims, individuals to bring civil cases, and for the government to bring criminal cases to prosecute this wrongdoing. So there's a lot to talk about. Call in 717-540-0580. Let me know what you think about what's going on in Washington with the Judge Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. We also are talking about the Paul Manafort guilty plea and how our friends in the liberal media are licking their chops at this, thinking they've got the president cornered now. They've got a guilty plea from his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who has pled guilty to 2 counts. And as part of that guilty plea, there is a cooperation agreement. And if you watch CNN or MSNBC, they're all agag about how this is evidence that Manafort knows about the collusion, and he knows that, and he's going to talk. He's going to spill his beans. He's going to cooperate in order to reduce his sentence even further. But there's just no there. If you actually read the news and follow the case, I think you'll conclude that really Mueller is using the cooperation agreement to go after actually prominent Democrats. Tony Podesta, the lawyer lobbyist who is the brother of John Podesta, the former campaign chairman of Hillary Clinton, and Greg Gregg, the attorney for a very prominent attorney who worked for President Bill Clinton in his impeachment, and President Barack Obama. So time will tell. We'll see how that develops. We've also had some developments in the case involving Stormy Daniels and then private citizen Donald Trump and this non-disclosure agreement. Recently, in just the past week or two, the lawyers for Michael Cohen and this entertainment company that he had set up to handle the payment to Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet about this alleged tryst that occurred between Stormy and then private citizen Trump. The lawyer for Cohen and the entertainment company, they have filed a paperwork in court to dismiss or to withdraw the arbitration claim they had filed previously against Stormy Daniels. Now, recall Stormy alleges she had a tryst with then private citizen Trump several years ago. Trump, of course, saw the Stormy body. Stormy saw the Trump cash, and the two perhaps became one. It's a tale as old as time, beauty and cash. Now, the higher Trump's celebrity got, the more money Stormy saw. As Trump's name and recognition was raised even higher with his presidential campaign as he neared the finish line, Stormy struck. She struck Adam hard with her demand for cash in exchange for her silence. Trump, through his attorney, Michael Cohen, remember, negotiated with Stormy a payment of about $130,000 for her agreement to not disclose the affair. Both parties agreed. They signed the non-disclosure agreement. Cohen paid the money. All was done. Both parties got the benefit of their bargain. But what happened? Donald Trump became president. And Stormy sensed her story about this alleged affair with a now sitting U.S. president had become much more valuable than the $130,000 she had received in exchange for her agreement to remain silent. So what does Stormy do? She tries to get out of the agreement that she had entered into so that she could sell her story for a lot more money to the tabloids. Do you think What do you think about Stormy's actions here and the decision by the Trump and Cohen lawyers to simply withdraw the arbitration request? You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. Tell me your thoughts about the Stormy Daniels-Donald Trump non-disclosure agreement. Now, remember, Trump had been trying to hold Stormy to her promise that she made in this agreement that she wouldn't talk about this alleged tryst. Trump even filed this arbitration claim alleging that she's in breach of the non-disclosure agreement because she had already started to talk about the affair publicly. Now, Stormy's attorney, Mr. Michael Avenatti, he responded by arguing that the agreement is void and thus unenforceable. Well, in the past week, after Trump and Cohen had been fighting that allegation, arguing that it's not void, that it's not unenforceable, that it is a valid contract and Stormy should be held to it, they reversed course. And they have withdrawn their request for arbitration. So now we have Trump agreeing with Stormy. He's rescinding the contract. But then, and here's the interesting thing, in the course of demand, they're also, Cohen and Cohen's legal team, they're demanding the return of the $130,000 that had been paid to Stormy. So that's where we are. We have Stormy Daniels claiming the agreement is void, is unenforceable. Trump and Cohen are now agreeing with her. All right, if the agreement's void, if it should be rescinded because it's unenforceable, then the money has to come back, right? And so I think it's a fascinating development in the case. And the interesting thing now is, even though Cohen and Trump are agreeing with Stormy's position, they're now agreeing with lawyer Michael Avenatti, who you've seen on CNN and MSNBC and every liberal talk show around the country, who is now a media darling and star himself, who is also now talking about running for president against President Trump in 2020. Michael Avenatti, he's now taking the position that the litigation should not cease, even though he's trying to. He's filed the claim to nullify the agreement. Trump and Cohen agree. Okay, nullify the agreement. Avenatti's on saying no. Let's not stop the litigation, and that's only because Michael Avenatti is now a huge media celebrity solely because of the existence of the lawsuit and the existence of the litigation, and he wants to depose President Trump. If Michael Avenatti gets the opportunity to depose a sitting United States president, he'll go down in the history books, and he'll be able to demand even more money for celebrity appearances and for future legal work. And so that's kind of the farce that this Stormy Daniels non-disclosure agreement lawsuit has become. It started as a farce, and it looks like it's going to end up that way. We'll talk more about the Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump non-disclosure agreement when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
A lot of words, a lot of talking.
Yeah. That's it.
Got a comment on Harrisburg 100. Facebook Democrats are wasting government time and money on the Kavanaugh confirmation. Yes, they are. It's all a farce, but that's what our politics are.
I can't believe the protesting demonstrations they're putting on, and that's something I don't think that the liberal media wants to cover very much of, because that kind of I think that kind of smears their reputation, seeing some of the shenanigans that they're doing.
Yeah, there were about, 100, nearly 150 arrests in the first 2 days of the Kavanaugh confirmation hearing. We heard from that Linda Sarsour, that the Muslim activist, left-wing demonstrator. She was arrested. There was that actress, Peekaboo something. I don't even know who she is, but she was arrested. So they're making a sham of the entire confirmation.
Yeah.
And the sad part is Judge Kavanaugh is a brilliant man, and he spent his entire career, his entire adult life, in the law, and as a lawyer and as a judge, and he has so much to say about the Constitution, about the Bill of Rights, about important legal precedents, about how he will conduct himself as the United States Supreme Court Justice. But we haven't heard much about that. Instead, we just hear this silliness, this absurdity coming out of Washington and the liberal media, with the protesters and the demonstrators making a circus out of what should be a very somber and solemn affair. And now it's like they've taken the lid right off the pot with this ridiculous, baseless allegation of something wrong that Kavanaugh did 40 some years ago.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, I mean, these leaks and these right before elections or confirmations, and I mean, I think the people of America should be demanding justice on things like that, to really dig into where something like that's coming from, an anonymous leak, right before some important decision is going to be made. Where is this coming from, and why are we going to report on it as being so credible when there's almost nothing to back it up?
Right.
So
1 minute, getting the 1 minute mark from Tori, our producer. So we'll get ready to go for the last 15-minute segment. That's actually about a 11-minute segment. It's going to make time for our commercial sponsors. If you're interested in being a commercial sponsor of the Mark Scaringi Show, you're welcome to call Jason at 717-657-7770.
Now back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism, where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day. Where are our callers today? We haven't had any calls. We typically get lost. I guess it's because I've been talking nonstop. There's so much news, legal news, political news coming out of our nation's capital, and we're trying to kind of sift through all of this. We had President Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, plead guilty yesterday to 2 counts. I believe the special counsel dropped 5 counts, pled to 2. There is a cooperation agreement in place that has our friends in the liberal media apoplectic nearly. They're happy, they're ecstatic, and they think that this is going to lead to Manafort spilling the beans about the Russian collusion that never happened and never existed. So we'll see how that case develops. You're welcome to call in and comment on the Manafort guilty plea. Do you think this is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump? Do you think Paul Manafort is going to cooperate, is going to spill the beans, perhaps make up something that didn't occur in order to get a reduced sentence in exchange? Remember the great civil libertarian Alan Dershowitz, the great constitutional lawyer and professor from up there in Harvard, talking about how, in plea agreements, sometimes the defendant will sing, and sometimes he'll compose. Singing meaning spilling the beans about what actually happened, and compose meaning kind of creating your own story, fabricating a story. Because your back is up against the wall, you're looking at a very long period of incarceration, so there is an incentive to compose a crime as if it occurred, but it didn't, and you try to do that in exchange for a reduced sentence. So that's the cooperation agreement issue. We've also talked about the dastardly deed done by the Democrats in the Senate to Judge Kavanaugh, a distinguished and honorable man, a brilliant legal mind who is now dealing with some innuendo about what occurred or may or may not have occurred about 40-some years ago. And remember, today we have Sean Gway from Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. We're happy to have Sean on. And Sean, what are your views? You run the Harrisburg 100 Facebook. It does a great job of reporting national, state, and local news. What are some of your friends and commenters? What are they talking about with regard to Manafort, Stormy Daniels, or Judge Kavanaugh?
Well, I would say with Manafort, we've discussed quite a bit here. It's the media is portraying that his cooperation agreement is that somehow he's going to flip on Trump, perhaps, and they're using it to continue this witch hunt Russia narrative that we've been hearing about for almost 2 years, that there really seems to be no credible evidence to back that up. So with Manafort, I mean, you made a really interesting point about, you suggested maybe this cooperation actually is in reference to something, with involving former presidents.
Well,
attorneys.
Tony Podesta, who is a lawyer lobbyist, a longtime lobbyist down there in Washington, D.C., brother of John Podesta, who's Hillary Clinton's former campaign manager, and Greg Gregg, the attorney for Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, who was involved in defending President Bill Clinton in the impeachment. They're very much involved in this Ukrainian dealings with Paul Manafort. And so I'm thinking and there's talk that there are going to be criminal charges here very soon with regard to those gentlemen. So I think that's really what the cooperation agreement is about. That's not what our friends at CNN want to talk about.
And that's really interesting because that actually, I mean, it just goes to show that it's this whole idea of collusion with Russia. It's almost like the Democrats are the ones, or the Ukrainian thing, which involves Russia as well. I mean, it's almost like they're the ones that are guilty of it, and they're paying the story that it's Trump doing this.
Well, yeah, in this particular matter involving dealings with the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian politicians, and of course has nothing to do with collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, but it's now being looked at. And of course, there have been charges and guilty pleas to failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, which I think is probably the first criminal prosecution for that offense in the history of the country. But this is what happens when you have a special counsel, and this is what President Trump has been railing about since almost day one. Is you have such broad authority by Rod Rosenstein in appointing the special counsel that he's supposed to be investigating allegations of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. We've heard this refrain so many times, to interfere in the U.S. election. But look at all of the prosecutions that have been brought. 5, 6, 7 cases, including several guilty pleas with Papadopoulos, a guilty plea with Michael Flynn, now a guilty plea with Paul Manafort, convictions earlier with Paul Manafort, charges against 7 or 8 Russians. None of it has anything to do with collusion between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Nothing has anything to do with the reason why the special counsel was appointed. And so now we're going to look into to a lawyer for Obama, a lobbyist for the Democrats, and whatever the heck they were doing over there in the Ukraine. Again, nothing involving interference in the U.S. election. That's the real problem with these special counsels. And I think I would counsel against these special counsels. And President Trump is right to say, from the beginning, he's so angry at his attorney general for recusing himself. And the president saying if Jeff Sessions had intended to recuse himself, which he obviously did, he should have told him during the time that President Trump was considering him as his attorney general.
Right. And the media has already created this illusion amongst the general American public, especially, anybody who doesn't really support Trump. They have this wholehearted belief that somehow Trump is involved directly with Russia to do, to get elected and whatever else goes along with that. So, I mean, it's hard to break that illusion they've created, and they still continue to report it on it as if that is the case.
Well, that's all they've got to go with. They've been running with it for 2.5 years now. We've had when did this investigation start? In July of 2016. We are now in September of 2018. I mean, it has been a long time for the FBI to be investigating something that obviously has not occurred. But let's open up the phone lines and let's hear from our listeners. You're welcome to call into the Mark Scaringi Show in the 2 or 3 minutes that we have left. 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. Oh, we have 2.5. Thank you, Tori. And the other interesting thing, which I think is just fascinating, is this Stormy Daniels non-disclosure agreement where her attorney, Michael Avenatti, is getting what he wants, which is the rescission of this agreement so that his client, Stormy Daniels, is free now to talk all that she wants to about this alleged tryst that she had with the president when he was then a private citizen. So Avenatti is getting what he sued for, but now he doesn't want it. I wonder why.
He doesn't want to return the money.
He doesn't want to return the money. Well, but he's it's not his money to return.
Well, right.
But he wants to be at the center, continue to be at the center of the national attention.
Right.
He wants to use this bogus civil suit that he's brought to try to take down the sitting president of the United States. And it's a shame to see our legal system being used and abused in this way in the Stormy Daniels civil suit and in the appointment of the special counsel. It's what is the U.S. justice system for? I mean, what's happening to our storied and hallowed United States justice system?
Yeah, that does diminish some of the credibility, just in general for the United States Department of Justice, and even the way they've described the FBI as being a political weapon used in these campaigns and stuff. So
it most certainly has been. I mean, it would make what the high-ranking officials in the Justice Department and the FBI under the Obama administration have done would make J. Edgar Hoover blush. I mean, and this is a real indictment on the Justice Department and the FBI of the Obama administration. And let's hope that with the new FBI Director Wray and with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he's able to really turn things around. Those men are able to turn things around in those two very important law enforcement agencies for our country to restore the rule of law and restore the hallowed traditions of those agencies. And I'm happy to see that several of those lawyers and prosecutors and investigators have been removed from their positions. Well, that's about all the time we have this week on the Mark Scaringi Show. We covered a lot of important legal and political topics coming out of our nation's capital. I want to thank Sean Gway and Harrisburg 100 Facebook, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, and thank you to our listeners at Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. We had several viewers. We've had several likes and comments, and you're welcome to continue to comment and be involved. And we'll continue to share our ideas and continue to advocate for constitutional conservatism and to put America first. And we'll have to apologize to our caller who's on the screen that we didn't get a chance to get to that particular caller. All right, Sean, anything to say before we bring it to a close?
Well, yeah, that whole with the Stormy Daniels, that's an interesting thing you brought up there, and I wasn't even completely aware of that with her attorney and what some of his intentions may actually be.
They're getting what they want, but now they don't want it.
Yeah.
Because the attorney, he just wants to depose Trump.
Yeah.
He wants to go down in the record books as the attorney who deposed a sitting president. He wants to, and the media spotlight that he has gotten has been remarkable. Hundreds. I was listening to Tucker Carlson on his show, and it was like 200 or 300 some media appearances Michael Avenatti has made, all because of the Stormy Daniels case.
So
I wonder, he's become a huge celebrity off an alleged tryst that a porn star had with a then private citizen.
Yeah. And it's a story they just started just to smear Trump again. And the
smearing of this president never ends. But we have just about the toughest president, I think, in the history of our country as far as toughness against personal attacks,
My God.
personal ad hominem attacks that this man has received, the likes of which I don't think any U.S. president has ever been subjected to, including Richard Nixon. This guy's got more Teflon even than Ronald Reagan did. I think that think about what has come at him and how he's still standing taller and bigger and better than ever, to paraphrase Elton John.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Harrisburg 100 Facebook. Thanks for tuning in and commenting, and we'll be back at you same time, same place next week here on the Mark Scarinci Show.